Welcome back to the MyLatinLife podcast. Since 2014, MyLatinLife has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. Our guest today is David Lesperance, managing partner at Lesperance and Associates. He's one of the world's leading international tax and immigration advisors, where he's successfully advised hundreds of high and ultra high net worth individuals and their families. David, welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me again, Vance.
Absolutely. We did kind of a roundtable last time a couple of years ago, but now you get your own solo episode or one-on-one episode, I should say.
Yeah, well, my long-term collaborator, Mal Warshaw, finally said he had enough of staying up on all the tax regs and properly retired.
Did he? He retired?
Yeah, well, he'd been doing it for 45 years, so we used to joke, I've only been doing it for 35 plus years, and so he doesn't hold my youth and inexperience against me.
There you go. That's funny. Okay, cool. And even though you're sort of on the tax side, you definitely keep up with the CBI stuff as well. And I think that's something we wanted to do today, is just sort of go around the horn with all the latest CBI, citizenship by investment news, and some of the different programs, and maybe approach it from like some angles and some actionable advice, maybe some things that people didn't know was out there.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much going on in the world, and I'm sure, in this hour we'll cover kind of everything from, France to the U.S. to Argentina and all points in between. But so what I particularly do is I look how residence and citizenship and a term called domicile impact families, both from a lifestyle point of view, but also look at tax issues and also family law. I like to tell my clients that taxes is a percentage of income, divorce is a percentage of capital. So I have, 11-year-old twins, a boy and a girl. So statistically, one of them is going to get divorced. I bet on my daughter because she already thinks the bad boys are cute. So she's got two future conversations in front of her. One is, okay, honey, we're getting married in 2 weeks. I need you to go get an independent legal advice in this prenuptial. Or, honey, I'm sorry it didn't work out. I'm sure you were expecting half. Unfortunately, that SOB father of mine put it in a trust when I was 6 years old. So you get half and nothing. So we look at how all these residence programs and a tool in the toolbox in putting together these plans are residence by investments, citizenships by investments, lineage citizenships, work permits, pensionero retiree visas, digital nomad visas. They're all tools in the toolbox.
Yes.
So it's really looking at it in a much more holistic manner.
Wow, you're speaking my language. I thought we were going to talk CBI. Now I just want to talk family law and asset protection and trusts. But maybe let's pick up on that a bit. You mentioned the term domicile and kind of how everything interacts. This is something we're talking more and more about on Twitter and on the content that I'm making, that simply having a second passport or something in and of itself isn't enough. There needs to be a structure. You need to think about your domicile, where you're a tax resident. How do you approach that with clients?
Well, yeah. So there was a debate. We're members of a group online of kind of insiders that talk a lot about this. And there was recently a discussion about severing tax residence in different places. And, there was a discussion of, you kind of just need to get, what we'll used to call like a letterbox corporation and a 7-day tax residence certificate, and that's good enough. And I kind of went through, well, no, not for every country. For example, Australia and Canada, you can't just sever ties there. You have to make ties somewhere else. Otherwise, they feel that you're still centralized your mode of living there. And so it's really important to understand the kind of concept of domicile and residence from an immigration and tax point of view. So maybe I'll take a moment to try to kind of explain that a bit.
Please, I would appreciate that.
So everybody has a domicile, which is a concept of an ultimate home. So even if you spend most of your life sailing around on a sailboat around the world, you still have a domicile, an ultimate home. And that's called you start off with a domicile of origin. And depending on the jurisdiction, that may be the home of a parent, often paternal. It may be where you were born and kind of spent the formative parts of your years. You can then change and acquire an ultimate home somewhere else by what's called a domicile of choice. And there's a whole bunch of rules depending on which system we're looking at, as to what happens if you change, you get yet another domicile, or you abandon that last domicile and get on the boat. What happens? Because you always have to have a domicile. So it's very important from a tax point of view for jurisdictions which have what are called remittance tax bases. It used to be the UK. Famously, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, closed that off in April. But Ireland, Malta, Cyprus have domicile and remittance bases. It's important there. It's also can be important for family law. Um, the UK, it used to be a wonderful jurisdiction from a tax point of view with the remittance basis, but it's the divorce capital of the world. So a little story: the last time the French decided that they were going to tax the super wealthy, I had a French client or a French inquiry that called me up, and he explained that his wife thought, "Oh, we'll move to the UK. There's good schools. You can take the train back to Paris." And I said, "Well, sir, we have lawyer-client privilege here. Can I ask you a personal question?" He said, "Sure." I said, "Do you have a girlfriend?" To which he responded, "I am French." Okay. "And what's your wife think about that?" "Well, she is not French, but she knows I am French." So I proceeded to tell him about the UK being the divorce capital of the world. And he did not hire me. I put his name in Google Alerts. And about 2.5 years later, the Daily Mail, there was a record divorce settlement. So his wife got him focusing on the tax issue, but completely blindsided him on the divorce issue. And divorce is not, a black swan event. Half of us get married, think it's forever, and half of us are wrong. So, it's something to kind of look at. You also need to look at things like forced heirship rules, civil law jurisdictions, Sharia law jurisdictions.
What is forced heirship?
Forced heirship is, instead of you as the person who is going to pass on your assets, you decide in a will, I'm going to leave, everything in this way. Forced heirship has a statutory, or in the case of Sharia law, Quran, some type of stated, you must leave this much to this person, this much to this person, this much to this person. So being aware that when you're moving to different jurisdictions, particularly civil law jurisdictions, you have to be aware of forced heirship rules. Everybody's racing to Dubai. I first went to Dubai in 1990. My business partner lived there for 20 years, so we're pretty familiar with it. And, you have to, and they buy big properties and they don't realize that that's subject to forced heirship rules. So there's planning that you can do, but you first have to recognize that you've got an issue and then you plan around.
Interesting. Okay. And so the dynamic there is that, like, even if you make a will and you say, I want to give it all to the firstborn son, the government of that country can sort of like supersede that or overwrite that.
Yeah, they can do it in two circumstances. One is if you've got assets in that jurisdiction. The other is if you have what's called comity, comity, as opposed to drama and comedy. Comity means that they have a jurisdiction over it. So people would move to the UK and get comity with the UK family law courts, and that's how they would, forum shop. So if you go and buy a property in the UAE, that's going to be UAE situs, so it's going to be subject to the Sharia law rules. If you are also seen to be only there, it could very well claim over global assets if the UAE claims comity over that jurisdiction. And I mean, of course, you're dead. you're not around to argue these things. So it's going to be the person who does better under one regime over the other who can challenge it. So anticipating the predictable, death is an event certain with an uncertain event date. Um, you can do some planning, even if you're in forced heirship rules or Sharia law rules, and there's different planning things that you can do, but you have to do that while you're alive so that you leave your assets to whom you want, as opposed to who some legislature or some religious text says it should be
Mm.
left to.
Okay. So what's kind of popular right now you're seeing in terms of asset protection, family law? What are some of the kind of the trends in the past couple of
Well,
years?
it's been an interesting year. Um, uh, we've certainly have lots of discussions about the United States, and we've got kind of traditionally my American clients. I did my first expatriation in 1990, so I've kind of been around the block on
What does
them.
that mean? You renounced in 1990?
No, I did my first client who renounced
Okay,
in
okay.
1990. I have never been a U.S. citizen. You mentioned before we started recording, I grew up in the Windsor, Detroit area on the
Mm.
Canadian side, and my parents had the option of popping me over in Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit, but
Uh,
because my parents were blood incompatible and I needed blood transfusions, the doctor said, no, you have that kid in Canada. So, but for the fact
okay.
that my parents were had incompatible blood, I also would have had an American passport. So,
Hmm.
um,
Just so you know, I am a dual citizen. Maybe I don't know that might come into the discussion as I ask my selfish questions to get free
absolutely.
tax advice. I was born in Canada, but I have U.S. citizenship.
Okay. So the U.S., as you know, has citizenship-based taxation.
Yes.
One of the things that is happening is something called the LaHood bill is been revived in the current Congress and is starting to make its way through and will probably be introduced. And that was the legislation that would soften the blow of citizenship based taxation for Americans who are not resident in um, in the United States. So that's something to
Hmm.
kind of people to pop into Google alerts and keep an eye on.
Okay.
Um, in the US, a number of kind of things. There are clients who this is a little cheeky for a Canadian, but you're a Canadian, so it's fine to say to your American audience. But I tell my American clients that they live in a political wildfire zone. And what are those wildfire concerns? Well, maybe mass shooting. I mean, I grew up when Detroit was Murder City, but then it was two drug dealers shooting at each other with a Saturday Night Special. Now you've got people with effectively automatic weapons walking into kindergartens and movie theaters and places of worship. Um, Dramatic increase in political violence, political polarization. Right after Charlie Kirk's assassination, I had six clients retain me within 3 days. And the interesting thing was, four of them were Democratic supporters, and two were Trump supporters.
Hmm.
So that goes across rising anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, LGBTQ. If you're politically active, that means half the country doesn't like you. So what do you do when you live in a political wildfire zone? Well, I'm going to fight the fire. I'm going to vote. I'm going to donate. I'm going to drive my neighbors to the polls. That's great. Absolutely do that. But it's called a wildfire for a reason. So what happens if, despite your most earnest attempts, you can't put out the fire? Well, no chief drops a crew into a hot zone without having an exit strategy. So what is your fire insurance? Well, that would be an alternative residence or citizenship. And then what's your fire escape plan? Well, they kind of come in three versions. One I'll call the go bag option. Oh my God, there's been a little wildfire or a hurricane or an earthquake. I'm going to go somewhere longer than 2 weeks, but not so long that I'm going to become tax resident in that other jurisdiction. So we'll call that the go bag option. Then there's the I want to I want to leave the United States until after the midterms or after the 2028 election, see what happens there. And I may, depending on the outcome, I may stay out longer. So that would be Americans living abroad. And, for my clients, it's important that, when they consider where to move to, that it's got to be livable. It's got
Right.
to meet all the needs of the family. And so that is quite often what are thought of as high tax countries. So we want to be
Yeah.
tax compliant. I'm going through this exercise with my own family where we've looked at Madeira, Cascais, Bermuda,
Nice.
Tulum, and we're going to Koh Samui in January. So we've got to make a decision kind of
Don't
by
do
the end of
Tulum.
the year.
Do not do Tulum. Mexico's
Yeah.
great. Don't do Tulum.
Yeah. Well, it's the there was good schools and kind of funky place, but my wife soured on it a bit because there isn't kind of a hospital that's close, and when you have
Yeah.
kids, you kind of think about, especially since my kids are rambunctious, um, you want to have near primary medical care. So anyway, so you've got to sell the place, meet all the family needs.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's really in the United States. There's all kinds of fire insurance, and sorry, that's the American abroad. That's the second type of fire escape plan, and the third type is the full blown expatriation.
Hmm.
And again, I tend to deal with clients who have more than 2 million in worldwide assets, so they are what's called covered expatriates. So we do all the planning around the exit tax and also Section 2801, the inheritance tax, which few people talk about, but which could be significantly more important,
Right.
especially for ultra high net worth clients. Um, I've got clients just to call just before this is California resident worried about the proposal that's being put forth for a one-time 5% wealth tax on
Hmm.
billionaires. Well, as soon as you say one-time wealth tax, my clients mentally eliminate the words one time and
Right.
just say wealth tax on. Also, with the volatility of the U.S. political situation, really nobody knows what's going to happen in the midterms. It's just over a year from now, let alone what's going to happen in the general election in 2028, over 3 years from now. So there's a less than zero chance that the Democrats could hit the trifecta and win majorities in both houses of Congress and the presidency. And then you've got Ron Wyden with his billionaire tax and Elizabeth Warren and AOC doing tax policy. So again, just as with house insurance, uh, you don't want to have a fire. You hope that it's not, but it's a very handy thing to have. And the more you have at stake, the more damage to your family well-being and wealth. You put that in perspective. What's the premium? What's the cost of getting fire insurance? And Vince, that can vary greatly depending on everything from family history to what jurisdiction you're going to go to.
Hmm. So for Americans, what's popular right now in terms of trusts, asset protection, family law? What are people kind of doing?
So, asset protection, when most people think of that term, they think of some stranger slipping and falling in their pool or on their sidewalk. But as I said, it's usually the most likely future litigant is a future ex spouse or ex son in law or ex daughter in law.
Hmm.
And so being able to do the proper planning well in advance, you don't do that planning, when the lawsuit is,
Right. It's like
consuming.
literally legally too late to move assets. There's a term for it.
Yeah, fraudulent conveyance is the
Uh
term
huh.
that you're looking
Okay.
at. So and it can be challenged. So so which jurisdiction will work? Again, I act on behalf of the client, so which jurisdiction is best serves them. So, ones that people often come to mind in Cook Islands. Um, it's very good asset protection legislation, but it is in the middle of the Pacific. So, oftentimes not very convenient to deal with, which may be a good thing or a bad thing depending on the situation. There's other jurisdictions like Nevis,
Hmm.
other jurisdictions like Luxembourg and Liechtenstein to consider. So it's really which jurisdiction really depends on what jurisdiction the person's going to be in and what works best for them. Is it some chunk of money that they're putting and they're not really touching all that often? It's part of an active business and they have to have a lot of interaction with the structure. So we take all these things into account and kind of reach into the toolbox. And one of the things, Vance, um, I know what I know, but more importantly, I know what I don't know. But
Hmm.
even more importantly, if I don't know it, I know who knows it. So
Okay.
when we're looking at these things, uh, the best analogy would be kind of as an architect. It's a team of architects. So there'll be a tax lawyer, a family law lawyer. There may be, people, depending on if we're extremely wealthy or dealing with issues of, how do you educate the next generation to deal with wealth? You may have several different jurisdictions that people are looking at. What are the tax laws in the country where people are? What are the tax laws in the country where people are going to? The forced heirship rules, all those kinds of things. So it's getting the right team together, designing the plan, and then executing the plan. And you'll have a project manager, which sometimes will be me. Quite often, especially when we're dealing with ultra high net worth clients, they'll have a family office person who will be
Hmm.
the quarterback. And so design the house properly and build the house properly and maintain the house properly.
Hmm. And is kind of everybody doing a trust structure, whether it's Nevis or Cook Islands or whatever? Like, it's pretty. Once you
No,
get to a certain income level, is pretty much everybody doing that?
well, again, there are different structures. There are foundations. So trust is a common law structure. So there are jurisdictions which have civil law. Um, uh, there are some jurisdictions which are civil law, but which have adopted statutorily passed common law structures. So it's really understanding kind of what's going to work best for the client. What are the concerns? What are the situation? What's the family dynamics here? What are the potential future threats? It's also not just asset protection; it's succession planning. I mean, again, I have a trust not just to protect against my future ex son-in-law, but also, if my wife and I pass, you don't want to let 11-year-old kids get access to all the money. Otherwise, they won't be able to get in the door for Star Wars paraphernalia and horse saddles.
Hmm.
So, how do you deal with all of those things? And sometimes you may have an adult who isn't responsible. Uh, and and so you need to look at all these different kind of family dynamics and come up and design and then build and maintain, you know, the structure that'll work. And so when we look at jurisdictions, those are tools in the toolbox. So we need to kind of design first and then grab the appropriate, you know, tools and construction material to actually build the house. So it'll vary. As I said, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, um, foundations in places like Malta, Panama are quite popular. Um, Nevis, it depends on kind of what you're looking at. Sometimes, Channel Islands or Isle of Man structures work best.
Hmm.
It depends on the situation.
Okay. And is pretty much everybody doing one or the other or something like this? Like, no, like most people aren't just running headfirst into 40% inheritance tax and whatever else, right? Like most people are doing some form of trust or foundation.
It was interesting. It was a revelation to me when I started dealing with kind of high net worth and ultra high net worth clients. Logically, you think the more net worth they have, the better advised they have, but that's not necessarily true.
Mm.
I've had clients that were worth 10 million that were extraordinarily well exercised. I've had billionaires where it's a dog's breakfast, and so it's the clients are because the threats are becoming are being publicized more and more. There were lots of people in the UAE, for example, that never thought about the UK and divorce until the wife of the emir went and got a wonderful, huge settlement in the UK, and then all of a sudden they're calling up, going, I don't, my son-in-law or daughter-in-law, I don't really trust. What should we do there? We've got a nice place in Knightsbridge, and what are all the issues? So as there's more, as these cases come out, and now, for example, I was joking with my business partner that I need to order a gift basket for the holidays for Donald Trump and the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves in the UK, and maybe Gabriel Zuckman, depending on what the socialists do in France this week, um, because they are driving people with huge concerns now. And the higher the net worth, the more damage to your house from the tax the rich wildfire or from the other threats.
Okay, definitely a lot to process there. Before we move on to the CBI, just kind of bringing everything together with the idea of domicile. What are you seeing kind of people doing? Like, are you actively trying to help people change their domicile away from, say, Canada and, add substantial ties to like a more favorable jurisdiction so that that can be their ultimate domicile? Or so it's like, yeah, how do you think about that?
So I think of it in kind of a Newtonian approach. So the question is, so we've got fire insurance, we've got a fire escape plan. Who's actually going to trigger it? That's the question. And I think everybody has a certain amount of what I'll call life inertia.
Hmm.
Connections, do they need to be in a location to make and maintain their wealth? Family connections, etc. So if you think of that life inertia, the higher the net worth, generally the less they need to be in a specific location to make and maintain their wealth. The more money they have for more options and things like education and reproducing their lifestyle. The
Hmm.
more options there are in the world, everything from lump sum jurisdictions to traditional tax havens to remittance based jurisdictions to places with pre immigration planning that you can do very well. I mean, Canada can be an excellent tax haven because it doesn't have an inheritance tax
Hmm.
or a gift tax. So for the right person, that would work. Um, and so, who will actually leave is the person who's the force, whether that's tax or one of these wildfire concerns, that's greater than their life inertia. And so, not only will that cause them to move, but they also have to know that there's a jurisdiction or a combination of jurisdictions which are going to meet their ongoing, needs for the family. That what I call sell it at the breakfast table. I mean, occasionally I'll get a particularly American client says, "Look, I've been sued, I've been audited, I've gone through a divorce. Move me somewhere where there's no lawyers and no tax system." And my smart ass answer is, "No problem. We'll move you to Pitcairn Island. Only 37 people on Earth have decided that's where they want to live." "Oh, no, 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 no. I need an airport. I need restaurants. I need this. I need that. I need this." And so, um, more often than not, clients will move to jurisdictions which will be thought of as high tax jurisdictions. One of the and again, I happen to like Puerto Rico. I have some Puerto Rican native clients that are quite good. But everybody, oh, I'm going to move to Puerto Rico, under something called Act 60.
Uh-huh.
And if you're moving from the island of Manhattan, it's a big move to the island of Puerto Rico. And it's generally, or more often, again, we're talking about the fund managers at this point. We'll get to the influencers and the next in crypto, the next wave. But that group, it was usually men that were driving it, and they're saying, "Oh, tax savings are great," but they'd come home and their spouse would be saying, "I hate this place. There's hurricanes and power goes out, and I can't get anything done. I can't go for lunch with my friends, in Midtown."
Mm.
Don't worry about me. Go talk to little Johnny, and go down the hall and open the door, and little Johnny's there. Says, I hate this place. I was the captain of the tennis team at our prep school, but here I'm the last guy to get picked for the team because I haven't been kicking a ball around since I was 3 years old. And I don't know what they're saying because they're saying it in Spanish, but I know they're talking about me. I hate this. So again, not going to work. So what does the client do? Well, the client can say, okay, we'll move back to the U.S. And because Act 60 requires you to be in Puerto Rico for 6 months of the year on the island.
Right.
And so these clients say, okay, I'm going to move back to the U.S., but I'm not going to move to New York, which has city tax and state tax and federal tax. I'm going to move to a Texas or a Florida, which only has the federal tax. Okay. I've got other clients say, look, I'm going to finally pull the trigger and do a full-blown expatriation and properly and permanently leave the U.S. tax system. Fine. And then I have some clients who think, oh, I'm going to cheat the game. And these are all actually all things that have been told to me by people. And I say, well, what happens if you fly in? Oh, I fly in privately into Teterboro. It's like, so did everybody on Epstein's Lolita Express. They keep logs.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think
no.
boat might be safe. If I
Well,
could kind
listen,
of,
I got a buddy of mine that's going to drop me off at Key Largo. I got a frat buddy of mine that bought a car. Okay, James Bond. So you got a cell phone, right? That's pinging off a tower every hour.
right. It's
Oh,
not in your
no,
name.
I got burner phones. Okay, Jason Bourne. Let's keep going. Assuming you use cash to pay all the way up
Right.
the coast as you're driving, and all of a sudden, you're in a bodega in the Upper East Side, and somebody you used to work with, because again, if you're going to do this, these are people of a fairly high profile, and they go, Vance, what are you doing here? I thought you were in Puerto Rico. Oh, well, yeah. And it's like, I used to work with Vance. I didn't like him that much. And there's a 40% whistleblower award. So it's like, so the
Mm.
days of cheating is just foolish. So I tell clients, either if it's not going to work for you, and if you keep pushing it, you may get that divorce as opposed to income tax savings. You know, either suck it up and move back to New York, and we'll soon know what Mandami is going to have in store for you, or move to a no state tax jurisdiction, or do an expatriation. But being James Bond or Jason Bourne, they're fictional characters.
Uh-huh. Well, definitely a lot of directions we could kind of take it. Um, I imagine you're probably seeing a rise in interest in second citizenship among Americans and Canadians. Maybe before the pandemic, before 2020, they're like, what's the point? I got the best passport in the world. I don't see the value in multiple. I'm imagining that you're seeing an uptick like I am in the interest in these things.
Very much so. So now I'm going to preface this personal disclosure with, I swear my siblings and I didn't go out nightclubbing looking for Europeans to dance with. But my older sister married a Latvian, then a German. My brother married an Italian. I married a Scotswoman, then a Pole. And my younger sister married an Irishman. So I've been doing lineage citizenship since before I got called to the bar. So during the pandemic, a couple of things happened. Number one is people said, oh my God, I can't just pick up, Condé Nast Traveler and go wherever I want. I'm stuck here. I can't even go into Canada, or I can't even go to the States if you're in Canada. So all of a sudden, people realized, how vulnerable they were with just one passport. That combined with they had a lot of time in their hands. So, all of a sudden people are doing ancestry.com searches and starting to really look at that.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of interest in this. It definitely has occurred. And it's interesting dealing with clients. I mean, I love my Irish brother-in-law, but let's just face it, the Irish didn't have a lot of imagination with regards to first and last names, right? So how many Mary Donovans do you have, or Patrick Rileys are there? And on your little ancestry or Ellis Island search, did you get the right one? and you got to get the right documentation. So whenever you're dealing with a lineage citizenship, it's kind of like a steeplechase. The first is, let's get the facts, and do you theoretically qualify? If so, then second hurdle is, can we get the documentation, or do you already have the documentation sufficient to prove it to that jurisdiction? And then the third is making the application. And lineage citizenships are not fast. It's not like you say, oh, I've got an Irish grandmother, and you 1-800, I am Irish, and a leprechaun delivers the passport to you. There's quite a long process. So you're looking at a year is fast,
Right.
2.5 years.
Ireland can be fast.
It
Italy's
is
insane.
now because
Okay.
they've kind of absorbed all the Brexit people.
For the purposes of time and respecting your time, so citizenship by descent, or as lineage citizenship, as you put it. I've never heard someone put it that way, but I like the term. I think everyone knows that's kind of a no-brainer.
Right.
And then, so let's say you get citizenship either by CBI, by descent, by living somewhere. How are you kind of like wrapping the package together for your clients in terms of then, the domicile and or plan B, or do you approach things in a unique way, you think?
Yeah. So then for the client, what would happen? What is going to be your fire escape plan? So, we went through the American go bag, American living abroad, and expatriation. In other countries like the UK or Canada or Australia or a lot of European countries, what do you need to do to sever your current tax residence? And that will vary from country to country. That may be as simple as reducing the number of days that you have in in the jurisdiction. It may also require you to get rid of certain ties or many ties in that country. It may also require you to acquire ties in another jurisdiction. So you have to know kind of all the. So when the Mexicans elected AMLO president, this is the fellow before Scheinbaum.
Mm-hmm.
The All of a sudden I had Mexican clients that were looking to get fire insurance and fire escape plans. And Mexico has an interesting thing with regards to severing Mexican tax residents. They say if you have more than 50% of your current year's income Mexican source,
Mm-hmm.
you're still a Mexican tax resident,
Yeah.
even though you spend little to no time here, have little to no ties here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, oh, well, then the Mexicans can never leave. No, Mexico is not unique, but it's one of the few Latin American countries which have a lot of tax treaties.
Mm.
So you can use the tiebreaker rules in the tax treaty. Um, we've got a lot of people that left the United Kingdom when they dropped the budget last October, the 30th, almost a 20-year anniversary now. And so they have a funny year end there where it's beginning of April. So I had very busy Q4 of last year and Q1 of this year. And so clients said, okay, where are we going to go to? And so my first question would be, they have something called a statutory residence test where we look at a number of different factors and how many midnights can you spend in the UK before you are deemed to reacquire tax residence.
Mm-hmm.
And if they say, well, between Wimbledon and the Chelsea Flower Show and boardroom meetings and visiting the kids at school, university, I'm going to spend more than enough midnights there. Say, well, then you want to move to a jurisdiction with a tax treaty that you can rebut that presumption that will arise if you trigger the statutory residence test. So Monaco, for example, doesn't have a tax treaty. Italy, Switzerland, UAE do have tax treaties. Oh, okay. I did a webinar where I looked at, it's called We're Out of Here. Looked at 17 different jurisdictions, kind of what to consider. So you really have to you need a kind of a holistic plan. Simply buying, a CBI or an RBI, it's kind of like you want to build that house. You don't just you just don't walk into Home Depot and go to the salesperson and say, okay, I want to buy a brick. Well, they're going to try to sell you the brick that pays them the highest commission. Is it the right brick? How does it
Uh-huh.
get put together in the house? You know, and so that I think I'm like seeing that a lot more, that a lot of advisors are moving from the kind of like brick salesperson to understanding how RBIs, CBIs, second citizenship, second residence,
Right.
digital nomads, how that fits into a greater,
I've been
a
talking
greater.
to people about this, and I've talked to some of the big CBI guys, and I'm like, why don't you do like the full structure? Why do you just sell the passport? And they go, well, we get a lot of our business from wealth managers and bankers and family offices and stuff, and we don't want to tread on their territory because then they won't send me the business for the passport. And so they're, which I understand. But for me, like, we do a lot of the residencies in Latin America. We do Paraguay and Panama and Mexico and every residency in Latin America. But I find people need a lot of other stuff. They need LLCs. They need foundations. They need a whole structure so that they can escape the Canadian tax system or the European tax system. And they really need someone who is an expert in these things to look at it holistically. Now, sometimes they don't value the advice, which is another topic, but that's definitely what they need.
Yeah, I have a different. I get probably 80% of my referrals from centers of influence, trusted advisors, and that could be everything from wealth managers to private bankers to tax lawyers to family offices. And I don't replace them; I supplement and complement them.
Hmm.
And so sometimes I'm like the last member of the architectural team to kind of jump in. Sometimes I'm pulling together the whole team
Hmm.
because for particularly for tax lawyers, tax lawyers generally, you know, many U.S. tax lawyers have probably forgotten more than I'll ever know about the intricacies of domestic tax planning. But once they look outside of the U.S., they're lost.
Hmm.
They have no idea. It's just not within their realm of experience or expertise. And so we'll say, okay, well, and you'll understand the client, you understand the client's situation, you understand the client's risk tolerance, you understand the client's control issues and all those things. Absolutely, you're part of the team. Now let's bring in other team members here who can complement. And so it's not an adversarial. We're not trying to steal somebody's clients. I mean, I don't know if Apple is a buy or sell. I mean, I'm currently bearish on the US dollar versus the euro or the Swiss franc, but I'm not a
Hmm.
Forex trader. Um, you know, so it's really understanding. I kind of understand, I call myself a tax savvy immigration advisor, an immigration savvy tax advisor. And so, um,
And by the way, can I ask you, are you on the in the bar in Canada or the U.S.? Where are you a lawyer?
that's an interesting. So I got called to the bar of Ontario.
Okay.
And I thought I was being really clever, and I actually passed all the bar exams for the New York bar. Again, this is back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. And I remember talking to this New York lawyer who referred a lot of people to me, and I was saying, "Oh yeah, I was going to get called to the New York bar," and he said, "So you're going to compete with me?" And I thought, I don't need to be a member of the New York bar.
Uh-huh.
I understand what you're doing. I'm not trying to replace it. I can, we're all trying to write and read the same sheet music here. So no, and again, as an Ontario lawyer, I could have very easily. I had a job offer in Hong Kong earlier in my career, and that was governed by. This was prior to the handover, and so I could have become a solicitor in the UK simply by writing the accounting exam. And again, I didn't for personal reasons. Ended up moving. I didn't end up moving to Hong Kong. Um, so I know a lot about these different jurisdictions, and it's really, as I said, I tend to work with kind of what I think are the best of
Okay.
breed.
So you're an
And
Ontario lawyer at the end of the day.
yeah, but I actually am no longer even an Ontario lawyer. So
Okay.
because when we do, if we're reaching for Canadian tools in the toolbox, I actually work with a Canadian lawyer, a guy I used to sit through bar admissions course with, who's a Canadian expert.
Hmm.
So I'll keep up on all these jurisdictions, but I always retain local counsel in a different jurisdiction. So if we're doing Portugal, I mean, I know all the categories, I know all these things, but we'll retain local Portuguese counsel. for a couple of reasons. Number one is the laws, as we know, are constantly changing in all these jurisdictions, and
Hmm.
so knowing the nuances and the forms. Often there's a language issue. The other is there's often you need to deal with a bureaucrat, and you need to have somebody who has those relationships and maintains those relationships. There's no one person that can maintain a relationship across all the different jurisdictions. And I'm agnostic with regards to jurisdictions. I'll analyze the law, figure out, oh, okay, this is going to be useful in this circumstance or that circumstance, and really try to stay up on it because there's so many things happening, and you open up the news every day. I mean, for example, we're recording this 2 days after Malay just won in the midterms in
Hmm.
Argentina, and so that means that the CBI in Argentina has now got some kind of wind in its sails. So I'm going to be in Buenos Aires in the middle of this month, meeting with Argentinian tax lawyers for a specific client. And is this useful? We're not going to move the client to Argentina, but as a Mercosur citizen, he gets better processing and lighter touch in, for example, Uruguay. So it's understanding how all of these different things can impact it. You get a client who says, "Well, yes, my ancestor came from the old country, but I don't want to live in the old country." It's like, no, if it's an EU country citizenship, that you don't just get the old country, you got 26 other options.
Yeah.
Oh, and if you're Irish, then you also get access to the UK under the Common Travel Agreement. Oh, okay. So it's really understanding kind of the backdoor way of doing things.
Hmm. And I know you know a lot of the hacks. Like I saw your article about British overseas citizenship, and I've nerded out about some of these things too. Like how can I get sort of a backdoor to the UK citizenship by being in like a low tax place and stuff. I don't know if I do it anymore. I don't want to get arrested for my tweets, but I think we're a lot on the same page with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, it was interesting. So a little bit of history there. So of course the Hong Kong handover occurred in 1997, and they are British overseas citizens. British overseas territories. So now we're talking about Bermuda, Cayman, Anguilla, Montserrat, Turks and Caicos. They have a different relationship. And the UK government, after the 97 handover, because they were worried if we give everybody who's got the Hong Kong overseas, uh, British overseas citizenship, they're going to all flood and come to the UK. Whereas, there wasn't a fear that everybody was going to leave Hamilton, Bermuda and go to Manchester. And so the government, on a quid pro quo basis, said, "Oh, we want to get the local legislatures to adopt our Know Your Client anti-money laundering. What are we going to give them in return?" And that's when they said British overseas territory citizens can then register as full UK citizens.
Hmm.
And I had a case, a long-term client of mine in Bermuda, a client slash mentor friend, and I said, "Oh, they made this change." And he said, "Oh, that's interesting. I've been a long-term resident here. What will this give me?" Well, a BOTC wasn't particularly useful to you, but a UK passport would be very interesting to you. He goes, "Okay, let me talk to my local council." As local council was, of course, a politician, said, "Look, I love you, buddy, but it's these other guys that hate you." And I came back and go, "Well, whether the local legislature loves you or hates you, it doesn't matter. It's under the British Nationality Act. It's the UK, so it's either the governor or the Home Office." So, well, that's kind of interesting. So I said, "Well, here's what the deal is. We'll retain a UK barrister, a guy named Laurie Fransman, who writes Fransman's British Nationality Act, and we'll bring a case, and you'll pay Laurie. And if you lose, that's your cost. If you win, you're going to have a party and invite all your friends." Well, it was a good party, so we did it. So then I started looking at, okay, what's the Delaware of BOTC? So is it going to be Cayman? Is it going to be Turks? Is it going to be all these? So it's understanding those types of things. So, people say, okay, I'm going to move to Cayman, which is becoming more and more, a viable thing. Ken Dart built a nice community there. There's a great new hospital that does medical tourism. So it's got some of the things that before, people thought were lacking in Cayman. So it's,
Hmm.
a viable option. Again, does it sell at the breakfast table? Does it meet everybody's needs? If you're double income, no kids, or you're empty nesters, you don't have to worry that there isn't, a great university there. Um, if you're somebody who likes getting on their motorcycle and driving around for 3 hours on the weekend, you're going to get pretty bored on on Grand Cayman pretty fast.
Hmm. And so is Les Bronson Associates, at least on your IMI profile, it says that it's a law firm, or how do you think about it? Or is it a consultancy?
We think of it as a consultancy because we don't want to claim that we're, a Portuguese law firm or in any of the jurisdictions that we deal with. So we're lawyers, so we understand, for example, the concept of lawyer-client privilege, acting on the client's best interest. We, for example, don't take commissions. So if we do an RBI or a CBI, and there's going to be, a government or a fund manager or a developer that's paying a commission, we actually flow the commission back to the clients. That way they know
Wow.
we're agnostic, unconflicted. Um, you know, they and that does well for our clients. Don't worry, Vance. I get paid. To keep my kids in milk
I
and
know I'm
pudding.
gonna have to ask you offline what exactly or how exactly you get paid, but yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a,
You don't have to share it here if you don't want to.
well, think of, I'm a fee-based advisor. So if you
Right,
think of
right.
like investment advisors, some
Uh,
are paid commissions by the products that they sell, and others are fee-based advisors. So I'm a fee-based advisor,
mhm.
and I tend to project bill. I kind of learned that early on when I left a big law firm. That was that traditional hourly model. You know, Clients would say, "Okay, that's your hourly rate. How many hours is it going to take? How much is this going to cost me?" So I said, well, here's what it'll cost and here's the benefit. And we very quickly kind of, the client can make a cost benefit because I'm dealing with business people.
Mhm.
And so they like saying, oh, okay. And I said, look, and the project bill inspires me to do it fast, efficiently, and perfectly the first time, all of which are good things for you.
Mhm.
And so that model, I started doing that in the early 1990s, and I haven't abandoned it. Seems to work well.
That's cool. I like it. So I guess a couple of rapid fire questions as we get to wrapping
Sure.
up. Do you think the Argentina CBI will actually launch? We're 1-2 days post election. So that's kind of the context. I mean, this episode will come out in a couple of weeks, but do you think it's going to launch?
I think if he had lost, it would be dead. I think he's got the wind in his sails now, and he's got the ability, and he's got enough because he didn't win an outright majority. So the coalition people, there were some supporters there.
Mhm.
I think if I would say more likely than not, it will launch,
Hmm.
and he seems to do things pretty quickly. The group I'm giving a speech to, a presentation, is a pretty high powered, pretty connected with the Argentinian government. So I'll get a pretty good read on, you know, better read on the actual percentages and timing by the end of the month, and I'll share that with the advisor group on our little Telegraph group here, and if you want to invite me back, we can talk about it. Um, for example, Portugal just surprised us all with the
Yeah.
vote on the lower house.
Yeah.
Um,
Not
and
fully
again,
passed yet. I guess we'll know. We might know more in a week or two by the time this episode comes out. But
well, it's got to be Senate, and it's got to pass then it may have a constitutional challenge. But my advice, again, I'm unconflicted and agnostic. My advice to clients is, I said the best case scenario is it's going to stay at 5 years. They're going to count when the day you apply for the golden visa. In the worst case scenario, it's going to be 10 years and they don't start the clock going until the application is processed, which is now kind of 2 to 4 years.
Mhm.
So it could be everything from 5 years to 12 to 14 years. And that's a big
Yeah.
difference. And we now have, for example, again, I don't act on behalf of jurisdiction. So then I look at, well, okay, Malta is coming back into the game with their merit program. And effectively, the way I'm thinking about it is they've said, okay, we got three different bars. One is an investment bar, a business bar. The other is a charitable bar, philanthropy, and the third is kind of what I'll call personal services. You know, yeah, if you're a striker for their football club and they're going to get them into the second round of the Euros of the World Cup, yeah, okay. But you may be an eye surgeon. You maybe have some benefit that you can teach at the university, or you can provide some service. The question is, how high are the bars? And what they've said is, we're abandoning the investment bar, which was the old sunk cost, about €1 million for the 1 year. We're not doing that. We're looking at each case. So I'm saying in that case, how I'm approaching it with clients is saying, we'll do it in two stages. One stage is we'll find out as much as uh, about you as possible. We'll work with local council. They'll negotiate with the government to figure out for you, sir or madam, the bars are going to be, the ones you're interested in are going to be this high. If you want to proceed, then we move to the second stage, and we execute. So that could be 18 months to a European citizenship. The non-habitual residence in Portugal changed to the Empatica, whereas Malta is a remittance basis. So the tax system is pretty simple to comply with. Um, Fairly light touch physical presence, unless you're going to be teaching at the university or something like, personal services. Um, and so when you're looking at 12 to 14 years in Portugal versus 18 months in Malta,
Yeah.
Malta may very well be a much better choice for a lot of clients
For the merit.
for the merit program.
Yeah.
And so I've got a number of clients who we're gathering all. We're at the stage where we're gathering all the information, and we will get into that first kind of negotiation with the government. I mean, it's a new project, so it's really kind of feeling out what's going to be acceptable, and obviously they're going to require more from a billionaire than they are from somebody worth 5 million.
Okay, so it's like for the citizenship by merit, it's like if you got more, you got to pony up more.
Yeah, and then the other countries, many countries in the world will have a similar merit type of programs. The question is, under what circumstances will they exercise it? So, for example, Canada and the U.S. have in their legislation the ability to grant it. There's just rare circumstances as ever that they will do it.
Mm.
France said, "Oh, a guy climbed a burning building and saved a toddler. We'll give him citizenship." Greece said, "Oh, well, we'll give it to Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson because they contributed to, uh, the wildfire and just as the program." Malta is going to give it to, sorry, who is the lead? The Australian guy who was the lead in the original Gladiator, Russell Crowe.
Malta's giving Russell Crowe citizenship?
Yeah, because because part of Gladiator was filmed in Malta, and he is promoting Malta and spends a lot of time there and kind of being an ambassador
That's cool. I
to the
didn't know
film
that.
industry. So, lots going on in the world.
Yeah, especially in RCBI. I mean, especially in Europe. I mean, but really everywhere. But I feel like the eyes are always on Europe for these things.
Yeah, because it gives you access not to just to the one jurisdiction, but to many.
Hmm.
And particularly for Americans, it's a shock to them that they can only spend 90 days there in a 6 month period in Schengen,
Right.
what we think of as continental Europe. And so, and Schengen with the I mean, I live in the Schengen zone, and they clock you in and they clock you out, and they're very serious about it. And if you overstay, I mean, I'm a resident, but so I don't have the issue. But if they overstay, it's a big deal.
Mhm.
And so I'm going to I'm going to ride a bike through France for a couple months. Well, that better be less than 3 months.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We help people with that. Get the at very least like a digital nomad visa or something,
Yeah.
right?
Digital nomad is very interesting. That was one of the good things that kind of came out of the pandemic.
Hmm.
That's a very good bridge document
Hmm.
to get for clients who are awaiting lineage citizenships or awaiting the processing of residence applications, and they just want to be able to overcome that 90-day and every 6 months Schengen rule, for example. Um, and it's also, lots of jurisdictions have figured out, when you say digital nomad, kind of the common perception is, a college graduate with a backpack and a laptop, working out of a Starbucks. But if you can remotely work, even if you're just managing your own portfolio, you can be a digital nomad. And because you've got no criminal record, you've proven, you've got sufficient money to take care of yourself, and you have medical insurance, different levels, different countries, but those things, your benefit, your long term. It's not like they have to, Vance is living in Barbados now. We got to build another kilometer of road or hire another police officer. No, there's no marginal cost to the
Right,
jurisdiction to have you there,
right.
and you're spending consumer spending. You're employing people. You're buying an espresso and paying 23% VAT.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
benefit
It
to the
brings,
country.
yeah. It's like a digital nomad brings a lot more money than a tourist does because they stay longer and so forth.
You stay longer. Yeah.
Yeah. Where are you in the Schengen, if you don't mind me asking?
I am in Poland. I had a Polish woman fall asleep on me in an airplane a number of years ago. And when she woke up, I said, well, now that we've slept together, maybe we should go on a date. And fast forward, we'll celebrate our 14th wedding anniversary in 2 days. And we have the aforementioned 11-year-old twins. So my wife and I divide our world into BC, before children,
Uh-huh.
and then AD, after delivery. So, BC, we were living in downtown Toronto. Ritz Carlton was fabulous, restaurants, everything was there.
You lived at the
Um,
Ritz?
yeah, right next to the CBC there,
Okay.
and stuff. But AD, there's no grass. I used to. Well, you're familiar. We used to go. I used to go play with the kids and the cows in the center of the TD Center. There's no swings. There's no. You walk out. The traffic was like crazy. So we thought, oh, well, we'll go to my wife's hometown. When I met her, she lived in New York. She lived in New York, Palm Beach, London, and Dubai. And so I said, oh, we'll go to my wife's hometown, which is Gdynia, which is next to Gdansk on the Baltic in Poland.
Mm.
First grandkids for my in-laws and things. And then, as the British Prime Minister once said, events, dear boy, pandemics, started school. It's very nice here. Cost of living is great. A very
Yeah.
modern city. It's great. We're just looking to, as I said, move on to somewhere. Early in the podcast, I gave the list of countries we looked at so far. So
Right,
we'll
right,
move on
right,
from
right.
there.
I mean, Poland's definitely gotten popular. I mean, so that's, I guess, the ultimate domicile. I guess you could say now.
Well, my domicile of origin would be Canada.
Uh huh.
I've been here now for 6 years, so I could claim I have a domicile of choice of Poland, and then I would be abandoning that domicile if I went to the next place until I could show I spent enough time and had enough connections there to say that this is my ultimate home, not like a temporary relocation. So domicile is a very tricky kind of thing um, to understand. So you really need to, nail that down with as much, and especially if you're dealing with estate tax, which is sometimes a domicile, because you're not there to argue. You're dead. So it's got to be, what evidence have you left your executor
Uh-huh.
to support the position that you wanted to be taken with regards to your estate.
And remind me the choices again. What are you thinking of?
So Madeira,
Portugal. Cascais.
in
Okay.
Portuguese, Cascais, just outside of London,
Lisbon.
um,
Yeah.
Bermuda,
Bermuda. Very different.
Tulum. We were in Rome just on a holiday. My wife's like, "Oh, Rome would be nice," and I said, "Well, yeah, but they're just." That was the day they announced that we were going to bump it up to 300,000
The flat
euros a
tax. Yeah.
year lump sum, and Thailand, Koh Samui.
All very different options.
Yeah. So we're just looking till the kids finish high school. We're not looking to kind of the place we'll die. Um, we may end up dying wherever we move to, but our next chunk is kind of like, grade 6 through grade 12. So
Interesting. All right. Well, keep me updated. That's cool.
yeah,
As we get to wrapping up, any kind of, we'll put a link in the description to maybe the Les Bronson Associates website or whatever you think's best.
yeah, and I post kind of almost daily, if not more, on LinkedIn. So I'm a good
Mm.
LinkedIn follow. And also, so there's me, Lesperance, David Lesperance, and also the Lesperance Associates. We have a website there. You can we write blogs. I write fairly often in IMI. I'm drafting an article right now on Roger Ver,
Mm.
Bitcoin Jesus, and what's the tax ramifications of that settlement. He settled. But so we never get to know if there was a constitutional constitutional argument that he was making, which of course is now not going to be adjudicated. So I'll talk about that, and we'll look at kind of different things. So those are all good follows. Lots of stuff, lots of white pages, some very detailed podcasts. If your listeners are having trouble fall asleep, we did it.
You're definitely on the
20 minute.
podcast circuit. You've done a lot of interviews.
Yeah, well, we did webinars on Americans in the UK moving to Portugal. What are the tax and immigration options? Ireland. We just did one on Italy. I'm organizing one for Switzerland. We'll do one probably also in the spring on the UAE. So these are popular jurisdictions where people are considering kind of what are, and again, we delve into pretty deep dive. So I get top tax and immigration lawyers, and we go through case studies. So especially for advisors who kind of want to understand more about this, that's probably there's lots of resources on the website.
Sounds like a plan. Well, we'll put the links in the description. You're an easy guy to find, also on Google and LinkedIn as well. But thanks, David, for doing this. Really appreciate your time and your insights and advice on this episode.
Thanks for letting me go on and on.
No, that was amazing. This has been another episode of the MyLatinLife podcast. Again, our guest today, David Lesperance and Associates. And for the audience, wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe to the podcast. It really helps us grow the show. Leave a review, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever your favorite podcast player is. We are there. Make sure you are following. We put out 2 episodes a week with amazing guests like David, and you won't want to miss an episode. Ciao for now.